Look, here at Sky News, we're all proud of the work that Peta Credlin has done because of her scholarship, forensic commitment to detail, and, of course, sheer guts. She's got the Andrews government in one almighty mess. But at the outset, it must be said, if what is being revealed is not sufficient for the federal government to call a royal commission into this debacle, with the broadest terms of reference, then what does it require? Then I suppose if you, as a national government, aren't prepared to go to the High Court to prosecute the case for Section 92 of the Constitution and get our borders open, are we whistling in the dark in arguing that the evidence in favour of a royal commission into this Victorian quarantine debacle is stacked so high you could see it from space? As one viewer has said to me, and I quote, "How is it possible the Premier, senior ministers, senior bureaucrats and a police commissioner can have no memory of events and decisions made and lie under oath without vital information, like records of telephone calls and text messages and other electronic communications, and then have no consequences?" Well, I told you months ago why they were lying to this inquiry, and they thought they could get away with it until the relentless Peta Credlin carted herself, mask and all, into the daily Andrews press conference. Let me remind you, though, that Andrews earlier this year introduced frighteningly tough industrial manslaughter legislation. The left-wing aim was to jail the boards of top corporations should they be linked to death in the workplace. But if approval of the quarantine arrangements, with incompetent private security being given the multi-million-dollar gig, and there have been over 700 deaths, then you get the drift. Someone's been responsible for unsafe work practices, and under the legislation they can be prosecuted. Remember, these so-called security guards had no proper training. The legislation that Andrews introduced earlier this year was at the behest of his union mates. And these duplicitous ministers and public servants would have been briefed before they appeared that the new industrial manslaughter laws don't exempt public servants and ministers. So, the stock answers from the lot of them, I don't know. I didn't know until I read about it in the media. There's not a person on the planet who doesn't know that Andrews and his government have been responsible for a failure of quarantining, a failure in aged care and unsafe work practices that have contributed to deaths. A royal commission is needed to answer one simple question: why aren't they all liable for prosecution? And if not, why not? But it's even worse than that. The knot tightens around their collective throats. Section 90 of Victoria's Inquiries Act of 2014 specifies it's an offence to make false or misleading statements or to produce false or misleading documents. Penalties up to 12 months in jail. Well, Victoria's Chief Health Officer, Professor Brett Sutton, has been given 7 days to provide a statement to explain his conflicting evidence. Don't forget it was Peta Credlin alone who has forced all this unworthy lot to hand over their phone records. And now this bloke Sutton, one of the many chief health officers who's preached alarmism and gloom, and might I say, never told us the truth about the virus, Sutton was included in an email exchange to health officials in March, advising those officials that private security had been contracted to guard returned travellers in hotels in Victoria. Sutton acknowledged receipt of the email in writing, in another email. But remember, when he appeared at the inquiry, he said he first found out about private security being used in late May. First found out? He'd been given 7 days to answer the contradiction. Why has he been given 7 days? 2 points emerge. Either his memory's crook, in which case he shouldn't be in the job, but a bunch of emails indicate he was the man in charge of policy and oversight of, quote, people in detention. In other words, the head honcho of the hotel quarantine program. Yet he couldn't remember being told on March 27 that private security guards were to be used for hotel quarantine. He was in charge of hotel quarantine, but he didn't know until May that security guards were to be used for a failed system. He claimed to have read about it in the media. Look, we need to stop beating around the bush. Sutton, Andrews and the lot of them would have been briefed on the law. I repeat, Section 90 of Victoria's Inquiries Act makes it an offence to make false or misleading statements or to produce false or misleading documents or not to produce key evidence. The penalty can be jail. To say nothing of the amendments to the Occupational Health and Safety Act, which makes those responsible for unsafe work practices that have contributed to death liable to prosecution. The lot could finish up in Her Majesty's motel. It is clear that Sutton is not alone. The former top bureaucrat Chris Eccles, former Chief Police Commissioner Graham Ashton, the current Chief Public Health Servant, Kim Peake. Who else? I make three final points. On the basis of what I have said, the credulity of the former judge heading the inquiry is on the line. Jennifer Coate. Is she running a kangaroo court or relentlessly seeking the truth? Secondly, there is now no government in Victoria that anyone can trust. It is in disarray. Credibility nil. Where's the governor? Linda Dessau was appointed by Andrews. She has reserved powers. She's supposed to be a barrister and a jurist. Amongst her reserved powers are that she specifically must, and I quote, ensure that Victoria's system of government operates within the accepted democratic and constitutional framework, unquote. If you're a jurist concerned with fact, then it's clear that democracy is dead in Victoria. The democratic framework has collapsed. The government should be sacked. The final point I've already made. The Prime Minister must urgently call a royal commission into the whole fiasco with the broadest terms of reference and to report urgently. One day the economy will recover, even if that is in the never never. But there are people whose emotional, psychological, economic and familial well-being will never recover. The absence now of real action not only shames the politicians and public servants who are responsible, but shames the politicians who can do something about it and won't. What are your views? I'm interested in them. alan@skynews.com.au and the text line 0414 000 848. And of course, you can listen live on the iHeart Radio app.